Thank you for joining us for our last prep talk today. It will be with Jade Olson, a lecturer in communication at the University of Maryland in College Park. In addition to academic work, Jade also does speech and presentation coaching. So Jade will be speaking to us about elevator pitches. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Grace. I don't use microphones super often. Can you all hear me? Is this a good kind of volume level? All right, fabulous. Well, as Grace said, my name is Jade Olson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Maryland. My training is in rhetoric and political communication, but in the last couple of years, I've been focusing more on oral communication pedagogy, speech coaching, and speech anxiety. And I've been doing a lot of work with academics and non-academics alike in helping to sort of cultivate ways to communicate who you are and what you're trying to do in a manner that is empowering and in a manner that allows you to tailor your message to your audience, but without losing your authenticity and your sense of kind of yourself. And so that's what I want to talk about in my presentation today on elevator pitches or elevator speeches. I will kind of use those terms interchangeably because you kind of hear both of them. So if you hear me using both of those words, they basically mean the same thing. So what I just said was essentially, in a nutshell, an elevator speech. It was a relatively short one, and it's one that I kind of developed specifically to be able to convey my qualifications and my goals for this session. And so I want to sort of transition into thinking about what an elevator speech is, and also thinking about what an elevator speech isn't. So if you're not familiar with the idea of an elevator speech, I looked at the etymology of this. It's not exactly clear when we started calling them elevator speeches, but it seems to have happened somewhere in the mid-1990s. And the idea is that there's this hypothetical situation where you find yourself in an elevator with a person who has power, whether they are the CEO of a company and you have an idea or a project that you want to pitch with them, or they're an employer and you want to work with them, something like that. And so you find yourself in this very kind of serendipitous, magical space where you have this opportunity in this elevator ride to communicate everything that you need to know to this person, such that by the time they reach their desired floor, you have been able to convey this to them and persuade them to invest in your idea or to hire you or whatever it is. I have two kind of big critiques of this framework. One of them is that I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and where we live, federal law prohibits buildings from being more than 11 stories tall. So elevator rides in DC are very short. You can't go through your elevator speech in DC because by the time you go from the first floor to the 9th floor, which is usually the top floor, maybe 15 or 20 seconds have elapsed. But the other problem I have with this is that you're not probably going to find yourself in this situation. It's very much this kind of hypothetical fairy tale. And imagine if you were in that person's position. You're the CEO, you're the person who's hiring, you're just trying to take an elevator to go grab a bite of food before your next meeting, and some random person decides this is a time for a verbal assault on you. This is not how we want to think about the elevator speech. What we rather want to think about it as is an opportunity for you to concisely articulate who you are, what you do, and what you're trying to do in a short amount of time to begin a conversation. In other words, we want you to be able to get where you want to go, literally and figuratively, in about 30 to 60 seconds. So let's kind of do a deep dive into this. And I want to highlight the fact that when you're on the job market, there's a lot of emphasis on, it's almost like a dog and pony show, right? Like you're trying to create this persona of yourself where you're going around and you're trying to impress people and you're trying to kind of meet their needs and fit into the niche that they have created for this position. But in fact, you have goals, they have goals. There are places where those goals overlap, and there are places where they don't necessarily overlap. The elevator speech is a means for you to make sure that in your interaction with a potential employer, both of your goals are being met. And I want to highlight a couple of specific goals there. One of those is efficiency. When you are in a context such as the NCA Career Center, or if you're at a reception or a networking event or something like that, your goal is to meet as many important people, potential employers, etc., as you possibly can. And their goal is to meet as many qualified applicants as they possibly can. The elevator speech is a tool for both them and you to have a meaningful interaction that leaves a lasting impression, but that also leaves time for you both to then go on and meet and talk to other people. So it's about efficiency. It's about creating a good impression. Keep in mind, again, you're not the only one trying to make a good impression. They're trying to make a good impression too. These employers are trying to represent their departments, their programs as a place where you would want to work, where a good, qualified, exceptional colleague like you wants to work. And it's really an opportunity to explore fit. You can think of yourself kind of as a puzzle piece. I know I'm mixing all my metaphors all around here. We're in communication, that's what we do. You can think of yourself as a puzzle piece, and you're trying to figure out where is the place where I'm going to really snap in, where there is kind of a hole in what the current department has, and I am the person who sort of fits into that space. So the elevator speech gives you the chance to sort of facilitate this process such that you're meeting your needs and you're achieving your goals while they're also achieving theirs. So you're going to develop your own personal elevator speech. Many of you may have already done this. You may kind of have a version of this. And the idea is that you've got a couple of different ways to articulate yourself in your back pocket. Questions that you want to consider. What makes you stand out as an applicant? This employer is going to be meeting so many people. I have been sitting here for the entire Career Center, kind of just watching and seeing how many folks have been sitting down at these chairs while all of this is going on. And I know that many of these fine folks who are hiring right now are probably just intellectually, socially, emotionally, physically exhausted from having all of these conversations. And so when they look back on this chaotic, hectic morning, this loud, ridiculous bananas morning, who are they going to remember? We want them to remember you. What impression are you trying to make? This is an opportunity for you to really sort of paint a picture of who you are as a person, and the impression that you want to make is going to be different depending on who you're talking to, depending on where you are in your career and what your goals are, but also depending on the program, who they're looking for, what type of skills you bring to the table, what type of qualifications you possess, and what you want to potentially do in the future. And then also returning to that fit question, right? In your elevator speech, somewhere in there, you need to have an articulation of why you are a good fit for this position. So being a good fit is more than just saying, I'm an excellent teacher, or I'm a really skilled researcher, I'm a good scholar, right? It's also, I fit the need that you have. I'm that missing puzzle piece that you've been looking for, and let me tell you why. When we're thinking about how to design an elevator speech, I keep combining speech and pitch because I don't know which one I want to use. So we'll call it a spitch. I want you to think about this as the beginning of a conversation. When I do presentation coaching and I work with folks who are developing elevator speeches for a variety of contexts, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is they try to cram everything that they want the person to know about them into this 30 to 60 second interaction. I don't know if any of you have a background in debate. I do. Debaters talk really, really fast. We have someone with a background in debate right here. Thank you. If you have that background, you are going to start motor mouthing. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to hear it. This is not the only chance that you have to say everything you need to say. Rather, you are planting the seed of a conversation. You need to let your personality shine through. I like to, again, every single thing I say is just a mixed metaphor. We're going to have every metaphor there is. Your personality is always a feature and never a glitch. And that has to do with making a strong impression, but it also has to do with that fit question. You need to sort of articulate and kind of perform who you are as a person and as a scholar, because that's going to help make you memorable, but that's also going to kind of establish at the outset, this is who I am. I'm not going to just modify and change like a chameleon to fit whatever program or whatever position it is that you're looking for. And also, they're looking for a colleague who they want to actually work with. They want to know not just, can you teach our classes, can you run our research programs, can you, serve on these committees. They also want to know, they're going to be stuck, if they hire you, they're going to be stuck in a room with you, like a lot. Are they going to want to be stuck in a room with you? Are they going to want to serve on committees with you? Are they going to want to go out to lunch with you? And then the main thing that I want to focus on, and this is what I'll turn to in a moment, is making it modular. You should not have one single elevator speech. And I'm going a little bit against what some of the advice that you may have seen that has been kind of distributed before, even by NCA, so I apologize, NCA. There's a flyer that NCA has circulated that gives an example of an elevator speech. And it says, my name is Jade Olson, I am a lecturer at the University of Maryland, teaching, research, here's what I want to do. And that is a good starting point. But you should not have one single elevator speech. You should have a bunch of different pieces that you can very quickly, very dynamically move in between each other so that you're crafting a customized presentation in that very moment. So let's do kind of a deeper dive on that. Think about a house. Every house has elements of it that are the same, but every house is different because of its distinguishing design features. Similarly, no matter which kind of version of your elevator speech you're giving, there are some things that are always going to be the same, and then there are ways that you are going to customize and tailor it. So the foundation of the house, this is what's going to always be the same. Who you are, where you currently are at, which program or organization you work for, and what is your position. And some people like to also bring in an articulation of what they do, how they kind of define themselves as a scholar in that very opening sentence. And if every person that you talk to and every job that you apply for, you want to really sort of foreground that, you can do that. And so when I'm giving my sort of elevator speech when I first meet people, I will often include right at the outset, even sometimes before telling them that I work at the University of Maryland, that I am an oral communication specialist, that's kind of my identity as a professional and as a scholar. Next up is the frame. All houses have a frame, but the frame is going to change shape and it's going to make the structure of the thing look different even though it's laid upon the same foundation. Here you're going to talk about your research area, your teaching responsibilities. You may also talk about service. One of the themes I've noticed is we keep just putting service kind of at the very end and saying that we don't want to, but then going ahead and doing it because that's what we do as a discipline. And here you're going to make a strategic decision about how you articulate this. If you're applying for a position at an R1 versus at a liberal arts college versus a community college versus a school that maybe is a global campus, you're going to articulate that differently depending on who it is that you're speaking to. And then the design. This is the flair part. This is kind of the aesthetic element. This is where it's very, very specifically tailored to exactly the person or people to whom you are speaking in that moment. So what is the specific position that you are applying for? At the end of your elevator speech, you're going to say, I'm really interested in this assistant professor position in technical communication, or whatever it is. This is where you can bring in examples of particular things that you want to do and particular people you even want to work with. So if there's somebody in this department who you think that you want to work with their lab, you can bring that up. If they have a center or a program or an innovative classes that you want to teach or something like that, you're going to bring that in at the end of your elevator speech. And that's going to make it truly customized and tailored to this interaction with this person from this program at this time. I have some practice tips and some advice on kind of revising and honing your speech as well. And then I'm going to make sure that I wrap up a little bit early so that we can do some questions and answers at the end as well. So I'm going to advise you to start with plain and accessible language. It's really important to remember that one of the great things about communication as a discipline and about NCA as an organization is that we are all coming at this from incredibly different angles. My training is in rhetoric and theory, and I identify as a historical critical scholar, but if I'm going around to these booths and I happen to sit down with a social scientist or an ethnographer, I need to be very, very careful that I don't bring out some jargon or some language or even just some frameworks and ways of thinking about the discipline that don't necessarily align with that person's training. And it's easy to be worried that accessible language means that you are dumbing it down. That's not what we mean, right? You're not dumbing it down, you're making it open for everybody. And then if the person to whom you're speaking does have the training that aligns with yours, then they can follow up. Then you can start dropping that jargon. Then you can start using really specific techniques and approaches and start citing people and things like that. But you want to start with accessible language because otherwise you run the risk of just putting somebody off immediately. Address people by name. This, I think, is one of those things where it seems like a no-brainer, but it's easy to forget to do, right? And so, look at their name badge and make a note to actually call them by their name and make a note to call the program by its name, right? To say, I'm interested in this program at this university, right? That goes a long way in sort of establishing the fact that you've kind of done your research and that you really are trying to fit in for this particular position. I have an anecdote that I kind of like to share that I heard from a friend and a mentor of mine. When she went on the market a few years ago, she really did her research. Like, we're all researchers. This is kind of one of the key skills that we all have. And she got an on-campus interview. And one of the things that she did to prepare for that interview was she got, how they've got the big note cards, like not 3x5, but one step bigger. She had one of those for each member of the faculty in this program. And she wrote down the faculty member's name, their research area, a representative publication, and the courses that they teach, right? She basically just kind of downloaded the whole website and put it on these cards. And on the plane, she's studying them and trying to remember who people are and things like that. Well, she was in a lunch meeting and the person she was sitting next to moved in their chair and they knocked her purse over and it fell over and all of her note cards came spilling out onto the ground. And everybody saw it, right? And so I can see people kind of in your face reacting to this. This is absolutely mortifying. She was so embarrassed. And so she just quickly kind of, scooped it up and put them away and moved on from there. But she told me that later on, somebody pulled her aside and said, I know that you must be very mortified about that incident, but I want you to know that you shouldn't be. What happened is that we got some insight into your preparation process. And the fact that you made these cards shows that you want this job. It shows that you plan ahead. It shows that you know how to do this research. It shows that you care, and it shows that you are prepared to do what it takes to, be in this position. And so that ended up actually working out for her really, really well. And then you also need to be ready to make really, really quick decisions. How am I going to frame this? If you're at a networking reception, for example, do you do the whole speech or do you kind of just do the first sentence or two because it's more of a conversation and then you invite the next person to talk? One of the questions that I know some folks struggle with is if you're in kind of a social situation, how do you transition from, we're both in the coffee line to, by the way, you happen to be hiring for this position and, this is my elevator speech moment. And I don't have any kind of magical answers for that for you because I think that it really depends on the situation and it depends on your judgment. But what this is about is being prepared to make those quick decisions and kind of not hesitating in that moment and deciding, all right, I'm going to use this version of my elevator speech. I'm going to only bring up kind of the first couple points of it and then make this framed as more of a conversation. And then I know that this is really overwhelming and it can be very challenging. And one of the things that's frustrating about it, as with everything related to public speaking and oral communication, is that it takes a lot of practice. Nobody is going to, after you listen to me talk for 22 minutes, be magically prepared to give an elevator speech. You have to practice it a lot and you have to make a lot of mistakes in order to figure out how to make it better. So I really encourage you to hone this elevator speech through conversations. Practice little pieces of it, right? Develop those modular elements of it when you are in social situations, when you're at receptions, when you're sitting down with the folks at the career fair, when you are in panels, when you're in between panels. All of those times are opportunities, and typically they're low stakes opportunities, which is nice, to practice little pieces of this. And when you do that, you want to be very reflective about it. So notice what works. If you articulate your research interests in a way that makes somebody's face kind of light up and they say, wow, that sounds really cool, can you tell me more about that? You need to make a mental note. Okay, whatever I just did there, I gotta keep doing it because it's working. And then similarly, if you kind of err a little bit and you maybe use a little bit too much jargon or you come on too strong and the person's face kind of goes like this, right? That's a learning opportunity too. And so you're going to go back to the drawing board and you're going to kind of change what doesn't work so that you're constantly updating this. And this is advice that I give to everybody, not just those working on elevator speeches, is you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. This entire enterprise, this whole endeavor of the academic job market is absolutely the weirdest, strangest thing. And going through it, you probably feel a little bit isolated, a little bit like an alien on another planet. It's unnatural. It can feel very disingenuous and inauthentic at times. It's grueling, right? And so if you can just sort of lean into that and acknowledge the fact that other people feel that way too, they may not show it, but they do, it's going to make you feel, I think, a little bit more confident. And my last piece of advice is fake it till you make it. I honestly mean that. And of course, I'm not talking about things like your qualifications and your research experience. I'm talking about confidence. The people who go around and who look very, very confident and very poised and like they know what they're doing, either they feel that way because they've been practicing and doing this a whole lot and the confidence comes from doing it over and over, or they're pretending and they're doing a great job at it. You have to just get your posture straight and put a smile on your face and take a big deep breath and act like you know what you are doing. And if you keep doing that, you suddenly over time will manage to know what it is that you are doing.